Yes, welcome my loyal viewers and subscribers. As you know, this is the Jamaica Young Police channel. And maybe I should call it the Jamaica Old Police channel because the young police, they don't really listen to I don't see no analytics that show that it's really young people. It's mostly people of my age group that really tune in, you understand? But, eventually, we're just trying to educate the people them with history and how to make them life better. As you know, June is LGBTQ plus month in America, and they would say, don't be a bigot now, you know what I'm saying? They say Jamaica is the most homophobic country in the world. I don't know where they get that information from. That is the biggest lie from the pits of hell. And I can testify to that, truthfully, in every way about that. That's a lie. So, now that you have listened to part one of this, the hatred for LGBTQ plus people, or should I say gay men, in Jamaica started. It started way back in slavery, when they used to use, these white men used to use their rifle, and they violate the black men right in front of everyone, you understand? That is, they have anal sex with the slaves, the strong black men, to demoralize them and, to make others look at them, because, that when somebody violates you, that's one of the worst things that can ever happen. So they have been using this as a form of terrorism to terrorize the black men during slavery. So that it's embedded and passing down in the genes. That's why black people are not welcoming to people who want to be like Jamaica, to be like Paris, because Jamaica is not Paris. So I want you to to continue to listen. This is part two. This is history. We don't expect the low IQ people or the low attention span people to listen to these things, because most black people attention span is like 5 seconds, like a goldfish. If it's not something that make them tickle their fancy and make them feel happy, they're not into it. That's how they don't educate themselves. So check out this. All right, one love.
Which is working day and night at the moment during the harvest, because if we leave the cane to stand for any time, the sugar begins to spoil and is less productive.
John, bring a piece of cane.
Snap that off and taste that.
Very good.
A tour of the factory is popular with visitors to the island.
Oh, Belle.
We set off down to the sugar works and examined the whole of the sugar making process, which is very curious and entertaining. I asked the overseer how long the workers worked at their particular jobs before he relieved them.
12 hours, every 12 hours.
How terrible. But sometimes they fell asleep, and if they fell asleep, their hand would get caught in the millstone.
Well, if a slave's hand were to get caught in the crusher, we have to use the axe to extract it.
We can't afford to stop the mill. It has to keep going every hour of the day.
I would say I would never want to have a sugar estate.
Sugar is, I think, unique in that every inch of the plant is used. The trash, the tops of the canes and the leaves are used to fuel the distillation process and the clarification process, and therefore it's self-contained. It also provides food for the labour and fuel for domestic cooking and a building material.
This is where the juice is transferred directly from the press into the clarification vat, and the solids taken off the top, the sediment taken off the bottom, and the syrup reduced in successively smaller coppers until it starts to granulate, and then we can transfer that into hogsheads to cool and transport to market.
Work in the boiling house is hot, dangerous and highly skilled.
Should we move away from the heat? The slaves are allowed to sample the syrup while it's hot. Once we start the cooling.
Water, water. Get this man to the hospital. You, take his place, take his place. Back to work, everybody, back to work. Back to work.
Each year, Summerley's plantations produce approximately 450 hogshead barrels of sugar and more than 200 large containers of the sugar byproduct, rum. He's one of hundreds of producers from across the Caribbean whose profits are fueling Britain's new imperial economy. The quantities of sugar pouring into Britain transform a once luxury item into a staple food. Even the poorest can afford a spoonful of sugar from Jamaica for their tea from China. The British love affair with puddings, biscuits and cakes dates from these boom years. Sugar is creating a new diet and new millionaires. Far from the sweat of his many Jamaican plantations, William Beckford of Fonthill spends lavishly on his artistic passions: music, architecture, writing, and all things Oriental. And Fonthill has talent. He makes the first English translation of the Arabian Nights fables and writes a Gothic novel about a sultan called Vathek.
Vathek's pride arrived at its height when, having ascended for the first time the 1,500 stairs to his tower, he cast his eyes below and beheld men not larger than ants, mountains than shells, and cities than beehives.
Like the author, Vathek is a slave owner who enjoys the power of money. In the story, Vathek builds a great tower, an image that will obsess Fonthill throughout his life.
Assist him to complete the tower, which in imitation of Nimrod he hath begun, not like that great warrior to escape being drowned, but from the insolent curiosity of penetrating the secrets of heaven.
There was one subject upon which everyone was agreed, and that was that Beckford was in danger of turning into his own creation, Vathek, a half-human, half-demon sort of creature.
Vathek becomes so admired by Byron that he calls it his gospel. In fact, Fonthill has the right education and the right contacts. The late Prime Minister Pitt the Elder was his godfather, and the Chancellor Lord Thurlow is his mentor. He even claims to have had music lessons from Mozart.
When I was about 5, Mozart was my piano teacher for a while. He was over in London on a visit. He was about 8, but already an international figure. In fact, I wrote something that he liked so much that he used it for the marriage of Figaro. Da 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 da, etc., etc., etc.
But it's the marriage of Fonthill that interests his mother. She selects a bride for him, the very suitable Lady Margaret Gordon.
Margaret was slender and delicate, and she had the most beautiful, white, smooth arms, and her cheeks used to blush the colour of a rose. She was a charming creature, artless, uncomplicated, and absolutely no pretensions to intellect whatsoever.
The marriage, though, doesn't end an existing attachment. Fonthill's grand passion is for a 16-year-old schoolboy, William Courtney, heir to Powderham Castle in Devon.
I think of all the creatures with which I've been acquainted, male or female, Courtney was the one who I felt had been created in my mould.
In an era when sodomy is a hanging offence, Fonthill's obsession threatens the future of the Beckford dynasty. In Jamaica, his cousin Summerlee is trying to increase the Beckford profits by investing in new slaves. He believes the flow of fresh slaves from Africa is essential for the survival of the sugar business.
If the African trade were stopped, the labour necessary to produce sugar would fall to those slaves who are already domesticated in Jamaica, who must therefore absorb an ever greater quantity of work, and their lives be shortened.
During the 18th century, 820,000 West African men, women and children are transported to an early death in Jamaica. Thousands more die at sea.
Fine cargo?
Yes, good lot.
Slaves are a planter's most expensive outlay. They cost anything from £5 to £100 each, depending on age, gender, health and skills, and the rise and fall of sugar prices.
No smallpox?
No, not in this lot.
Good.
They are traded at auctions or scrambles.
Up, on your feet, on your feet! Up, come on your feet!
A scramble is a brutal free-for-all, in which the planters literally fight for those they want to buy.
The Negroes from the more popular African countries are soon snapped up no matter what the expense. The more indifferent ones may only be sold by offering credit or reducing the price. They're the ones who are most likely to fall sick, even though when they left their homeland they were most probably healthy and strong.
The indifferent ones are called refuse slaves. They are often abandoned in the streets to die. Summerlee names his new acquisitions. New slaves have to be broken in or seasoned into a life of slavery.
Seasoning a new slave takes the best part of 4 or 5 months. And out of every 4 African slaves, scarcely one produces a really efficient worker.
Slaves arriving from Africa must first be managed as if they were animals. They must be tamed before they can be treated as men.
Almost a third of seasoned slaves die within the first 3 years, most from disease, overwork or simply depression.
The best slaves are the ones we breed on the plantations. They are born into the state of slavery and don't complain.
Something in my heart, like a stream running down, makes me feel so.
In his plantation handbook, Summerlee details his slaves' daily routine, comparing it favourably to the plight of English peasants.
The sufferings of the slaves are usually exaggerated by those who are not acquainted at first hand with the life in Jamaica. Outside harvest time, they rarely worked in the field after sunset, which was never after 7. So from then until 6 the next morning, and every Sunday, their time was at their absolute command.
Something in my heart, like a stream running down.
Self-sufficiency is encouraged, particularly when America's war for independence from Britain creates food blockades. The slaves have to grow their own food, and many go hungry. By contrast, planters live an extravagant lifestyle, paid for by credit. They've got into the reckless habit of consuming profits from crops not yet harvested.
White society in Jamaica is much too addicted to expensive living, costly entertainments, rich clothes. If only they were more abstemious and paid more attention to the productivity of their plantations, many more of them might have amassed considerable fortunes.
I would imagine.
For visitors, the excess of Jamaica can be overwhelming.
Such eating and drinking I have never seen. There was loads of food, all sorts of meats, highly seasoned, jellies, gallons of wine, hot and cold chicken, fish, stews, fries. It was quite disgusting.
And of course, some of the native plots of land.
The white community sticks together for companionship and security, with owners and employees dining at the same table. The whites number only 20,000, surrounded on an island by 200,000 slaves. They feel particularly unsettled by the campaign against slavery, which is finding support in England.
So-called philanthropists across the seas are blind to the true interests of their own country. There are plenty of people in England in need of the pity and the protection they're so anxious to give the Africans.
I once interviewed a slave and asked him would he like to be returned to his home country. You know what he said? He said that in Jamaica he has food, clothing and a good house. But in Africa he'll be destitute.
Many of the Europeans, the peasantry is destitute although free. I simply hope that some of the compassion that is felt for the slave is also felt for the planter. We lose so many slaves through natural disasters, torrents, trees falling, not to mention sickness. The loss of them would be the ruin of us all.
Well, it's very easy to criticise, but they still eat the sugar and they still drink the rum.
Thomas Thistlewood is the overseer of a neighbouring plantation. Jamaica has raised him from poverty in England to a position of almost unchecked power.
Good wager.
£200. Yeah?
Like many planters, Thistlewood is sexually predatory.
To your private stock.
White men live immorally with their female slaves, and until they improve their own morality, there is no chance of us teaching the Negroes decency and religion.
Where will we find out next weekend?
Whites of the Caribbean are subject to the same frailties as the rest of mankind, but they do have a natural interest in the other sex, which means that they are not always faithful husbands.
Cushioned by his money and feeling above the judgment of the rest of the world, William Beckford of Fonthill indulges his dangerous obsession with the 16-year-old William Courtney.
When we first began to know each other, I had a strange feeling that somehow we'd known each other as friends in a previous